In the pre-dawn darkness of August 23, 1968, explosions erupted across the valley below Marble Mountain, Vietnam. Fires blazed through the American compound as enemy sappers unleashed hell on the sleeping base. High above on the mountain's peak, a small team of American Special Forces operators and their Vietnamese allies watched the carnage unfold, not knowing they were about to become the next target in what would become one of the most harrowing small unit actions of the Vietnam War. This is the story of Larry Trimble, codename Gambler, and the siege that nearly cost him everything. Larry Trimble was a Special Forces operator assigned to America's most classified military unit in Vietnam, the Studies and Observations Group, known simply as SOG. This top-secret organization conducted the most dangerous covert operations of the conflict, including cross-border missions that officially never happened. At SOG headquarters, operatives were given codenames pulled from a list kept in a safe. Trimble had chosen Gambler, a name that would prove prophetic for a man about to bet his life against impossible odds. Assigned to Recon Team Rattler, Trimble served as the team's second-in-command alongside team leader Ed Ames. Their team included 6 Vietnamese allies, former North Vietnamese soldiers who had been captured or defected and were now fighting alongside the Americans. In late August 1968, RT Rattler received what seemed like a routine assignment: establish a listening post on top of Marble Mountain, a strategic peak overlooking the sprawling American compound at Da Nang and the vital Route 1 highway. The mission was pure observation: watch, report, and stay invisible. The team loaded their gear and made the journey to the base of Marble Mountain. From there, they climbed several hundred feet up ancient stone steps, moving cautiously with stories circulating about booby traps. The climb was exhausting in the tropical heat, loaded down with machine guns, mortars, radios, and precious 5-gallon water cans. At the summit, they found the perfect spot: a small area about 18 meters in diameter, surrounded by large boulders that provided natural cover. The position offered commanding views of the compound below and the South China Sea beyond. For the first day and night, it was almost peaceful. Trimble watched the lights of Da Nang below and small fishing boats in the distance under a canopy of stars. It was hard to believe a war was raging. But that tranquility was about to be shattered forever. At approximately 2 a.m. on August 23, 1968, the night exploded. Enemy sappers had infiltrated the American compound below, and massive explosions lit up the valley like deadly fireworks. From their perch high above, Trimble and his team watched in horror as buildings burst into flames. The first explosion came from a nearby Marine outpost equipped with a 106mm recoilless rifle. When Trimble tried to raise them on the radio, he got only silence. Then he heard one of his Vietnamese teammates shout a warning: "Mortar! Mortar!" The enemy had spotted their position and was bracketing them with 82mm mortar rounds. The team scrambled for cover as explosions walked across their small perimeter, sending rock fragments and shrapnel whistling through the air. Trimble and Ames grabbed their M79 grenade launchers and began returning fire, trying to silence the mortar position they could see flashing in the darkness. For a moment, the incoming fire slackened. But this was just the beginning. Over the next several hours, the enemy launched multiple attacks on their position. Small arms fire cracked around their rocky fortress, while mortar rounds continued to fall. The team was completely surrounded, cut off from any possibility of reinforcement or escape. As dawn broke, the situation became desperate. The team was running low on ammunition, and their water supply was critically low in the crushing heat. Someone had to get down the mountain to retrieve their cached water and assess the tactical situation. Trimble volunteered for the dangerous mission. Taking only his rifle and basic ammunition, he began the treacherous descent with one of the Vietnamese team members and their interpreter. The climb down exposed them to enemy fire, but they had no choice. As they reached the lower levels of the mountain, Trimble heard shouting from below. When he called down to ask what was happening, His interpreter yelled back that enemy soldiers were demanding their surrender. "Why aren't you shooting?" Trimble shouted back. The response was immediate gunfire. The enemy soldiers scattered, and Trimble's small group gave chase, pursuing them along a trail that curved around the mountain. In their hasty retreat, the enemy had abandoned something precious, an 82mm mortar, still set up and ready to fire. "Grab it," Trimble ordered. "Not the base plate, it's too heavy, just the tube." They also recovered a rucksack left behind by the fleeing soldiers. At the time, Trimble had no idea how valuable that intelligence would prove to be. Back at the top, the situation deteriorated further. The Vietnamese team members, exhausted and demoralized after days of constant attack, announced they were leaving. They were going to try to fight their way down the mountain and return to the compound. Trimble knew it was likely suicide, but he couldn't stop them. "The only thing I ask," he told them through the interpreter, "is leave me as many hand grenades as you can. I'll try to give you covering fire as you go down." As his teammates began their descent, Trimble was left virtually alone on the mountain, surrounded by enemy forces. He had perhaps one Vietnamese soldier with him, limited ammunition, and the growing certainty that he might not survive the night. But then something remarkable happened. Gunfire erupted from below as his teammates ran into an ambush. Minutes later, he heard familiar voices calling up from the base of the cliff. "We want to come back! We can't get down!" Initially, Trimble feared it might be a trick, that his teammates had been captured and were being used to lure him into a trap. But after tense negotiations, he allowed them to return. When they reached the summit, the team leader looked him in the eye and made a promise that would sustain them through the remaining hours of the siege. "We will stay with you until the end." As the siege continued, Trimble radioed SOG headquarters at Da Nang, desperately requesting supplies. When Colonel Norton asked what they needed, Trimble's response became legendary. "We need hand grenades, and we need cigarettes, Coca-Cola, and beer." Incredibly, Norton made it happen. The next morning, a helicopter hovered over their position, unable to land, but dropping supplies directly onto the small perimeter. Along with the vital ammunition and hand grenades came cases of Coca-Cola for the Vietnamese soldiers and beer for the Americans. But the most crucial support came in the form of an AC-47 Spooky gunship. When the pilot made contact with Trimble, he asked for a way to mark the friendly position. Trimble used a strobe light, but the pilot couldn't distinguish it from all the other lights in the valley. So Trimble did what any desperate soldier would do. He detonated a block of C4 explosive. "I got you," the pilot radioed back. "Where do you want the fire?" "Right around us," Trimble replied. "Well, I advise you to hunker down because it's going to be bad." What followed was a demonstration of American firepower that likely saved their lives. The Spooky's 3 7.62mm miniguns unleashed a torrent of fire around their position, each gun capable of firing 6,000 rounds per minute. The sustained fire was so intense that rocks and debris rained down on the team, even as they huddled together in their small perimeter. The fire was precise and deadly, breaking up enemy formations and preventing what could have been a final assault on their position. Later, Trimble learned from the pilots that if they'd experienced even slight turbulence, the guns could have gone off target with devastating consequences for the friendly forces below. After 3 days and nights of continuous combat, the enemy attacks finally subsided. Trimble and his team had held their position against overwhelming odds, but the true significance of their stand wouldn't be revealed until later. When they were finally extracted by helicopter and returned to the compound, intelligence officers examined the contents of the rucksack Trimble had recovered during his dangerous descent. Inside were detailed plans for an attack on the nearby Marine Amphibious Force Base, an attack scheduled for the night after the Marble Mountain assault. Thanks to Trimble's actions and his team's heroic stand, the Marines were warned and the attack never materialized. The small team's refusal to abandon their position had potentially saved hundreds of American lives. In gratitude, the Marines invited Trimble and his team to their base for a barbecue celebration. The Vietnamese soldiers were treated like celebrities, signing a guest book and enjoying all the Coca-Cola they could drink. For men who had faced death together on a mountaintop, it was a moment of pure joy. The Marble Mountain siege lasted 3 days and nights, but its impact extended far beyond those 72 hours of combat. The intelligence gathered prevented further attacks, the position denied the enemy a strategic observation post, and the successful defense demonstrated that even small units could have outsized effects when led by professionals and supported by superior firepower. But perhaps most importantly, it showed that in the crucible of combat, men from different cultures and backgrounds could forge bonds strong enough to face death together. When those Vietnamese soldiers returned to the mountaintop and promised to stay until the end, they were embodying the best traditions of military service: loyalty, courage, and commitment to something greater than oneself. Larry Trimble's codename was Gambler, and on Marble Mountain in August 1968, he bet everything on duty, honor, and the lives of his teammates. When his allies wanted to abandon the position, he chose to stay alone rather than give up the mission. When they returned, bloodied but unbroken, they made a pact that would see them through the darkest hours of the siege. It was a bet that paid off in the most important currency of all: the lives of fellow soldiers who would never know how close they came to death, saved by a small team of warriors who refused to quit when quitting would have been the easy choice. That's the story of the Gambler's last stand, a forgotten battle that saved countless lives and proved that sometimes the most important victories happen when no one is watching.